I currently work at Pearson as the product manager for the OT assessment line. So I'll be presenting the webinar today, but I also have some colleagues with me from our UK office. So we have Carolyn and Faye, our assessment consultants, who will be here to answer questions throughout the presentation. But we will also have some Q&A time at the end. So if it's a question that would be good for lots of different people to hear, they will save it for then, and I will answer the questions in the Q&A. But feel free to pop your questions in at any stage throughout the presentation. Just also to let you know that the webinar is being recorded, and so if you miss any parts or if you have colleagues who couldn't make it, there will be the opportunity to review the recording at a later time. I think with that, we probably will just get started. We have quite a lot to get through in our time here. So let's move on to the presentation. So let's talk about what the Movement ABC-3 is to begin with. Some of you may already be familiar with Movement ABC-2, but for others it may be a brand new test. So just talking about what we're assessing here, it's an assessment of gross and fine motor skills, and the age range is from 3 years up to 25 years and 11 months. So if you know the Movement ABC-2, you'll already have spotted one of the first differences between the second and the third editions. The authors are Sheila Henderson and Anna Barnett, and they were also authors on the Movement ABC-2 along with David Sugden. The main uses of the test are to identify motor delays or difficulties. It's one of the tests that's considered a gold standard for use with developmental coordination disorder, or DCD, but any other issue or condition where there might be motor delays, it's applicable there as well. Can be used for intervention planning, monitoring progress, and also it's used quite a lot in research. And if you do a lit search, anything to do with motor skills research, you'll find a lot of papers over the years have used the Movement ABC-2, and we will expect the same to continue with Movement ABC-3. There are two measures that are included in the Movement ABC-3 overall package, I suppose you could say. So the test, which is the performance-based component with the actual tasks that the examinee will complete. And then there's a checklist, which is a questionnaire that's designed to be filled out by a caregiver. Sometimes it might be filled out by a teacher. And in the older age ranges, it can be filled out by the examinee themselves. And those two related measures can be used together in tandem, or they can actually be used independently as well. In terms of who uses the test, it's a B-level assessment, which means it's available to most allied health professionals, but we tend to find the main users are occupational therapists and physiotherapists, obviously who's have that motor area as a primary domain of concern. However, there are others who also use it in either clinical practice or research, including psychologists, either educational psychs or neuropsychs, kinesiologists, paediatricians, some special ed PE teachers, and various other professionals as well. So that's for the test. The checklist actually is an A-level. So although all those B-level users may use it, in addition to that, it's also available to a wider group of professionals, including PE specialists, special educators, classroom teachers, specialist tutors in higher education, and again, others who have that related interest in looking at movement, particularly in everyday life settings. So the big question, of course, that everyone would like to know is what has changed with this revision of the Movement ABC. So I've already mentioned that we now have an upwards extension. The age range now goes up to 25 years and 11 months. The reason for that being that that tends to be the age at which individuals, particularly individuals with individual special needs, tend to stay in formal education settings, and so it gives professionals working with those young people a chance to use a test with norms applicable to those populations. And also we just find that it's useful for goal setting and monitoring of those individuals all the way up into that early 20s age range. Something else that's very different between the movement ABC2 and movement ABC3 is we have much greater alignment between the test and the checklist. So you might remember for movement ABC2, the test spanned 3 years to 16 years, 11 months, but the checklist was really just more for the 5 to 12 year group, so the kind of the primary school age group. We now have a checklist available for the entire age range of the test, so 3 up to 25 years and 11 months, and also the domains that are assessed across the same across the test and the checklist. So we have both of those instruments divided into those 3 domains, which we'll expand upon in the coming slides. And we have, as with the test, we now have individual checklists for each age band as opposed to just one. There's also greater consistency of items in the test across age bands and the checklist actually. So rather than having 3 quite separate sets of items, we now see some carryover of the item across age bands, although obviously the tasks get more challenging as we increase the age of the examinee. And we now have some additional items. So movement ABC2 had 8 test items. Now we have a total of 10, although not all ages will do all 10. Our 3-year-old children will only do 7 of those tasks. And some improved usability. So we have some new equipment included in the test, including some walking line mats, which save you having to tape or draw a line on the floor for some of the balance tasks. But also the length of those walking line mats is the correct length for some of the aiming and catching tasks, which means you don't have to measure distances when you're setting up the test. And it can be easily set up in lots of different environments if you are quite transient and you move around a lot. We have lighter weight jumping mats. So that will be good news to anyone who's used to carrying those heavy movement ABC2 mats around. And we have a new balance board. It's a much more sturdy and it's easier to use. And then lastly, we have some digital options on Q Global. So Q Global is Pearson's online assessment platform. We've never had any digital options before for movement ABC3. And so I'll talk to you about those in a few slides' time as well. So looking now at the items comparing movement ABC2 to movement ABC3, you can see in the top row of each of those age band sections the tasks on movement ABC2. And then you can see that there are some items that are literally a straight carryover from the 2nd edition to the 3rd edition. The items that I've circled in red are new items, and the items that have a green square around them are tasks which may have been on the previous version, but they have been adapted in some way. So you can see each age band has a drawing circles task that replaces the old maze task. Then each age band also has a threading beads task, which previously we only had threading beads in age band 1. But as I said before, the task gets progressively more difficult as you move up into the ages, as the beads get smaller. And we've added the threading lace task to age band 1 as our 4th manual dexterity task. The 3-year-olds will not do all of those. They will not do the drawing circles task or the threading lace. And there is also one of the aiming and catching tasks that they won't do as well. I think that's probably all I need to say about that, other than, we also have the bouncing and catching task in age band 1 with a new ball, a larger green ball that I'll show you a picture of later. And for age band 3, we have a throwing beanbag onto the mat task with a target that moves from trial to trial. And I'll show you a photo of those items later as well. Any items that I've got a blue star on here include new equipment. So while the item might be the same as what was used in movement ABC2, the equipment that it's used with has changed. So we have our walking line mats, we have our new balance board, for example. So that's why I've got those blue stars there. Here's another comparison slide. This is actually taken from a comparison document that is on the website. So you can hop onto the website and download that for yourself. But it basically just compares them side by side. So you can see the differences in the age range and also the age band. So age band 2 now goes up for 1 additional year. We can see that we have additional tasks that have been added in manual dexterity, aiming and catching. And that we have more unified constructs. So the items are much more similar in each of the 3 age bands. Something else that's new, and this was a COVID-related revelation, I suppose, for movement ABC2, all the normative data was collected in the UK. Because of the impact of COVID and lockdowns and things like that, we actually joined forces, the UK and Australia and New Zealand joined forces to collect about half the data in each of those regions. So we have now a much more global tool. And of course, the data were compared and found to be similar enough that it was statistically viable to combine the data. As I mentioned before, we have only ever had paper and pencil options for administering the test. We now have both paper and pencil and digital options, which I'll elaborate on further shortly. And as I said already, the checklists have also been expanded, and so we'll talk about those as well. We have some new and revised items, and I've already alluded to the fact that some of the manipulatives have been improved to enhance usability and make them easier to wash and things like that. Taking a quick look at the structure of the test, people who know the test already will see that we still have manual dexterity, aiming and catching, and the balance subtest or balance domain is now called balance and locomotion, which is more reflective of what's actually being tested in that section of the test, where we're not just looking at static balance, we're also looking at dynamic balance or locomotion. And we can see that the checklist covers the same 3 domains. So for manual dexterity, there are 24 questions under that section that are divided into personal care, home, classroom or work, depending on the age range, and drawing, writing or keyboarding. And then we have questions about aiming and catching and balance and locomotion. And those questions on the checklist, while they cover those 3 domains, are really talking about everyday life situations that would use those underlying skills. We can see that both the test and the checklist also have questions about non-motor factors, which was an important part of the movement ABC2, and it's kind of been expanded upon with movement ABC3, recognizing that not all motor performance is only related to motor ability. There are the non-motor factors that will affect ultimately someone's motor performance as well. And then a new section that we have on the checklist only is we ask about the impact of someone's motor difficulties on their general life, which is always a handy thing to understand, is not only what the skill level is or the difficulties might be, but what impact they're actually having on the person's quality of life and their participation in life. So looking at the components, we have 2 manuals. So we have a test manual, and then we have a checklist manual. The checklist manual, if you buy a paper kit, comes in paper format, but it's also available digitally in the Q Global Resource Library. Oh, my slides are gone. I'm not sure if everyone can see my slides. They seem to have disappeared for me. Apologies. One of my co-hosts, can you just let me know if you can still see the slides?
We can't see your slides at the moment, Melinda.
Okay, I might just stop sharing and try resharing. Apologies for that. Not sure what is going on with this, but I will try to reshare shortly. It may have to do with the animation that I had built into that slide, but okay. All right. Can anybody just
I can
let me
see your
know
screen again now, Melinda. We can see it.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. So let's see where we were.
Yeah, I can see it all now. You're all good.
Perfect. Thank you. Sorry about that, everyone. All right. So as well as our two manuals, we now have our record forms, one for each age band. Again, if you know the movement ABC-2, you will recognise that we have the same colour coding as we had before, where age band 1 is everything is sort of this red shade, age band 2 is green, and age band 3 is a blue colour. And then we have, as I said, now the different versions of the checklist. And there are actually two versions for age band 3. There is a self checklist or a checklist that can be completed by someone other than the examinee themselves, depending on obviously their ability to do that. Then we also have just a chance to look inside the test manual. Again, if you know the movement ABC-2, you'll see that it looks quite similar on the inside, where we have our colour coding again for age bands 1, 2, and 3. So this is an age band 2 task. And we have our photos on the right-hand side of the page, which you can use as part of your teaching when you're showing the examinee what to do. And then we also have some text in light blue of things that you should say to the examinee, as well as things to emphasise and some information about scoring and generally what the task is. And then here are the rest of the components that you receive in the kit. So you can see we have a bead threading set. Some of the equipment will look very similar with the triangle test, the lacing board. You'll see there's now the large green ball, the walking line mats in the bottom left-hand corner there. The jumping floor mats look very similar in the photo, but they're actually thinner and more lightweight, and you can pop them in the washing machine if you want to wash them. And then this yellow circle target here is the new target. It's not something that you will stick to your wall anymore. It's actually something that goes on the floor and you place it on the walking line mats for the that aiming task. And also here you can see on the right-hand side the new balance board. So it actually has a hinge in it. It just opens out. It comes as one piece that folds in half. So here are some sample test items. This isn't every item on the test, but this will just give you a flavour of what's in the manual dexterity subtest. So you'll see the drawing task here, the drawing circles task. There's a different one of those for each age band, and the circles get smaller as the age bands lift up in age. The pegboard is the same, and the pegs, the threading beads, as I said, different size beads for different age ranges. And we still have the same tabletop mat as well as movement ABC-2. For the aiming and catching items, some of them for the younger age bands use the large ball. Otherwise, we're using the tennis ball. We still have the throwing onto the mat task, but with age band 3, you'll put that yellow target at various points on the blue target mat. so that they have to adjust their aim as they're throwing the beanbag. Reasonably straightforward. And then our balance and locomotion domain. So you can see the line walking mat in action there, something that you spread out on the floor, and the examinee will either walk forward or backward on that line. You'll be able to see in the bottom left-hand corner there the balance, board balance task. And we still have jumping on the mats and hopping and zigzag hopping on the mats. So when you're administering the test, it does take a little bit longer than the movement ABC-2 because we have those additional 2 items. As I said, if you are assessing a younger child, though, you won't do all of those items, so the admin time should be a little bit quicker. And the setup time should be reduced as well with those walking line mats and the jumping mats as well. They won't take you quite so long to set up and pack up and lug around, and you won't need to worry about drawing any squares or anything on the floor as we have done in years gone by. I've mentioned the colour coding of the age bands. Something else that's new, if you want to, is you can use demonstration videos. So there are videos available that show a sample examinee doing the tasks. And so they're another option. If you want to, you can show them to the examinee to help them understand what they need to do. So particularly if you've got someone who you feel for whatever reason may not understand the language that you're delivering the instructions in, you've got videos as well as another option, as well as the photos in the manual. And of course you can demonstrate, you can do hand over hand. You've got quite a lot of flexibility with how you actually teach the task to the examinee. And so that flexibility with the instructions does make the test really useful for clinical populations who, for one reason or another, may need that flexibility of teaching. Something else that's been revised quite heavily is the qualitative observations tick boxes. So again, if you already know the movement ABC-2, you'll know that underneath each task, there are a series of boxes where you can check for different things that you might observe while the person is doing the activity. There's been a lot more standardization of those qualitative observations tick boxes now with the movement ABC-3, and I'll show you what I mean by that. So here's a sample from an age band 2 record form. You can see that we have less of these qualitative observations because we felt there were just too many, and it was a bit unwieldy for people trying to actually read through them all and figure out which one to tick. But we've also tried to categorize them into these different bolded headings, so it's easier at the end to actually collate the information. And you can see where that happens on the back of the record form with this qualitative observation summary. You can collate the information and actually see if you're starting to see patterns where particular areas seem to be causing difficulty across different types of tasks as well. So that's a nice addition to help your sort of analysis and your clinical reasoning as you look at the results of this test. And here's a sample on the left of the non-motor factors. So these same questions appear both on the test record form and also on the checklist. So you can compare them side by side as well. And then if we think about scoring, the scoring is slightly different as well. So at the task level, you will calculate a scaled score. So that has a mean of 10 and a standard deviation of 3. And then each domain, so manual dexterity, aiming and catching, balance and locomotion, each domain will get a T-score and a percentile rank, as well as then there's one overall total motor test score, which again, you can calculate a T-score and a percentile rank for that. The T-scores have a mean of 50 and a standard deviation of 10. So that's a slight change from the movement ABC-2. You can also calculate confidence intervals for that test total motor score. And there are the non-motor factors cut scores. So they aren't a normed score, but you can see whether the amount of the score total for non-motor factors kind of meets the cutoff for needing maybe some further investigation or potentially causing some concern or disruption to motor performance. So you can, again, use that for your clinical reasoning, deciding what next steps to take around non-motor factors. And then we have our traffic lights system as well, where you can look at the percentile rank and based on whether it falls the 5th or below, or between the 5th and the 15th percentile or above the 15th percentile, that will place the performance in either the red, amber or green zones, which is just, I guess, an easier way to understand what those scores mean and also to explain it perhaps to lay people who don't know about statistics and help them understand what the significance of the results is. And that same traffic light system can also be applied to the checklist, both at the total checklist score and at the individual domain level score. So there's a little bit more information that you can gain from the Movement ABC-3 data than what you got from Movement ABC-2. I wanted to talk a little bit about Q Global because we have these new digital options for the Movement ABC-3. So as I mentioned before, Q Global is Pearson's online assessment platform. Some of you may already be familiar with Q Global. Some of our other popular tests on there, which are kind of often used by the same audience as the Movement ABC-3, the Pedicat, the Sensory Profile, the Bot2, the Vineland. So all of those tools are on Q Global, so you may have used it already. Now you will also have the option to either administer the whole checklist digitally with Q Global, or to use Q Global for scoring of the Movement ABC-3 test component. So when you administer the test, you either will use a paper record form, or if you wanted to, you could input the data directly into Q Global, and you would use what we call the manual entry delivery for that, where it has basically everything that's on the paper record form has been replicated in Q Global, and so you can enter any piece of data, whether it's qualitative or quantitative. You can enter that into Q Global without needing to use a paper record form if that's how you would like to work it. Of course, you can also use a paper record form and then input the data from the paper record form into Q Global. That's another option. So both of those would come under manual entry. And then if you're administering the checklist, you'll have two further administration options. One is called on-screen administration, and that would be if you wanted to pull up the checklist on your device, say if you were sitting with the respondent and you wanted to either do it like an interview or give your device to that person to input the data into, or you can use remote on-screen administration, where you will email out a link to the respondent and they will open the link from their email inbox, and it will take them to a separate window where they can input their responses, and you will receive notification when they've finished, and then you'll be able to go in and generate the report. So it's completely remote. The person doesn't have to be in the same room as you, and it also can save you a lot of time because it can be done in that person's own time and it doesn't take up any of your assessment appointment session. Let's take a bit of a look at how that works, particularly if you're not familiar with Q Global. So you'll first of all set up your examinee in the system, enter some basic data like their date of birth. You can use their name, or you can use a pseudonym or an ID number, and then you'll need to assign the assessment to them. So you'll go to assign assessment, and you'll find if you look at assessment starting with M, you'll be able to see the first two choices there are Movement ABC-3 checklist or Movement ABC-3 record form. So if you wanted to do that manual entry option, you would just click the little radio button as I have here for Movement ABC-3 record form and then press assign. And then you'll be taken to this screen, which is where you can see it's already said that we're going to do manual entry. You can enter the date of administration. It will calculate the age based on the date of birth that you entered for the examinee, and you'll enter your name in there as the examiner. Now, what you'll notice once you do that is that you'll get this warning message that pops up at the bottom, just letting you know that because we have the 3 different age bands, and Q Global will automatically assign the age band that it administers according to what date of birth and date of assessment you put in, that if for some reason you change either the date of birth or the date of assessment after you've entered some data, after you've started the test, you need to be really careful that you well, try not to do that really after you've entered data, because you may lose the data that you've entered, especially if it means that by changing the date of birth or the admin date, that it's pushed the examinee into a different age band, because it will actually just reassign the form and everything you've put in will be lost. So really double check very carefully the date of birth that you've entered for the examinee, and make sure you're kind of pretty happy with that it's all correct before you start administering the test. So just wanted to draw your attention to that. Then what you'll do next, once you've got that part set up, is you'll go up to this tab at the top called Domains, and that's where you're going to enter your data. And so if I click on Domains, this is what I get to, and you'll see that we've got these little arrows, down and up arrows here. So it goes in the order of the record form. So it starts off with manual dexterity. You can collapse these individual headings and you can expand them. So if you do the first task, manual dexterity 1, which is usually the drawing circles task, once you've finished putting data in for there, you can collapse it, which means you don't have to scroll down. Everything is just sort of, the next one is there at the top waiting for you. So I've closed manual dexterity 1 and 2 as if I've already administered those, so that then what's kind of front and center on my screen is the item I'll be up to next, which is manual dexterity 3. So using those collapse arrows is a good way of keeping track of where you're up to and making sure you don't have to scroll too much, because it's basically all on one big long screen, the whole record form. Most of the parts of the screen are things that you need to fill in. Some parts are optional. So if you don't want to keep track of whether you administer the practice items, you don't have to tick this practice complete box, but you do need to enter a time taken for the trials, or you have to click if there was some reason why you couldn't score it. Perhaps the examinee refused to do it, for example. So there needs to be something entered in here. And then also down here you can see that we have the boxes to tick for the qualitative observations. So in this case, I've ticked the posture box, and if I kept scrolling down, I would see all of the other boxes for that particular task. So here's just an example of where the collapse option is, and you can see up there it says collapse all, which will mean that you will just see all the different tasks and then you can just open them as you need. It's quite a flexible and user-friendly way of entering the data if you didn't want to use a paper record form. Once you've filled out all that information from the different test tasks, you will then need to go to the additional observations tab. So this is, I guess it sounds a little bit like it could be supplementary because it's called additional observations, but there are also parts of this tab which need to be completed before you can generate your report. So if I click on additional observations, this is where my non-motor factors come in, and the non-motor factors do need to be completed in Q Global, in order for it to generate the report for you. So those are just yes or no questions that you hopefully won't take you long to click through. And then once you've got all the information entered, all the non-optional items are filled in, you can then click on Proceed to Reports, and Q Global will automatically calculate all the scores for you and you can generate a brief narrative report, which is a real time saver. And even if you didn't want to use it in its full format, it comes as a PDF format, you can take that information, you can cut and paste it into another report. Here's an example of what the report is going to look like. And I should say that this digital option is actually releasing literally in a couple of days. So on the 14th of March, this is when the digital part of the Move in ABC-3 will be released. So it's not available just yet. If you've pre-ordered a digital kit or any of the digital components, you've only got a couple more days left to wait, and then you will have access to those. So you can have lots of fun playing around with that. So with the report, as I said, it comes as a PDF. You'll get a cover page with any of the information that you entered and that you chose to include in the report will be on this cover page. And then there'll be various tables with the scores. So a score summary profile that shows you what the scaled scores were for each of the individual tasks, and then maps the scores onto the traffic light. So you can see whether the scores fell into green, amber, or red for those different areas of the test. You'll also get a summary of what the transformed scores were. So it'll tell you what the raw score was, and then the scaled score, as well as then the T-scores and the percentiles and things like that. And then the narrative. So the narrative gives a brief explanation of the test. It lists down what the score was and whether that would be considered to be red or amber or green. So as I said, it can potentially save you time if you're happy to use it as it is. And then also you will get this qualitative observation summary. So when I showed you before this sample item where I had ticked one of those boxes about posture, that will transfer all of those ticks automatically onto this observation summary, which is what I showed you on the back of the paper record form. And you can see, oops, that sometimes you'll see these X's going the whole, like you'll see a pattern of them. So in this case, fluency for this particular examinee seemed to be a problem for them, not only through all the manual dexterity tasks, but also all the aiming and catching tasks. So that's a nice extra bit of information that you can get from this about sort of underlying factors that might be contributing to their motor performance. If I wanted to do the checklist, as I said, we have a few more options with the checklist because there's no kind of physical manipulatives or physical tasks to do. So you would choose checklist. You then will be given the choice of manual entry, which is if you wanted to use a paper checklist for administration, but input the data into Q Global for it to do all the scoring for you. The on-screen administration or in-person online, or the remote on-screen, which is where you send a link by email. So you're going to choose one of those. And then you need to choose the relationship of the respondent to the examinee. So it might be that it's the person themselves. It might be that it's a caregiver or a teacher or other. Just bear in mind that in Q Global, you'll only be able to calculate a score if in age band 3 you choose the self option. If in age band 2 you choose either the caregiver or the teacher, and in age band 1 if you choose the caregiver. This is outlined in the checklist manual, and of course if you use paper forms you can score it up with the paper manual no matter who the respondent is, but this is the way that the norms were gathered during standardization, and so this is the way it's built into Q Global. If you do choose a relationship that is not supported in Q Global, you will get an error message just advising you, or not an error message, a warning message just advising you that while you can proceed and you can administer the checklist still with Q Global, it won't give you any scores. You'll only be able to use the data qualitatively. So if you are are worried that you'll inadvertently choose the wrong respondent, it will give you a message and you can choose whether to go ahead or not. So then here's what it looks like if you are filling it out on Q Global. You can see that we have our question, the ratings here, easy, a little difficult, difficult or unable, and then you just click the little radio button there. And then again, when you generate your checklist report, you'll get a score summary with the raw score, a cutoff score, which will just tell you whether that score or that total raw score falls into the red zone, the amber zone, or the green zone. You'll get the same thing for the non-motor scores. And then this impact score that I talked about before, it's not a standardized score as such, but you'll be able to really just compare over time, if you're using the checklist for multiple administrations, whether the impact of motor difficulties is hopefully reducing over time. You'll also be able to choose whether to include in your checklist report a summary of all the items and what the responses were. And then again, as with the test, you will be able to get a narrative that briefly describes the checklist and the scores and what they mean, which you can give to a caregiver, a teacher, any other interested person with the consent, obviously, of the examinee or their caregiver. So I've talked a little bit about the digital already. In terms of what you or how you can buy the Movement ABC-3, it's available in both a print kit and a digital kit. The print kit was released in December, so it's been around for a couple of months. The digital kit, if you've pre-ordered that, will be available, as I said, on the 14th of March, so not long to wait now. Both of them contain a manual. If you buy the digital kit, the manual is in digital form. It's not something you can print and download. It's something that is a read-only on the screen, and it's an asset that you'll keep in the your Q Global account. The checklist manual in either paper form or digital form. With the print kit, you'll get 25 record forms for each age band, as well as 25 checklists for each age band. If you buy the digital kit, you'll get 50 Q Global reports or 50 checklists, bearing in mind that Q Global will allocate the age band according to the date of birth and the date of the administration. And so it might be quite handy, particularly if you tend to see quite a lot of one age band and very few of another. It means that you don't end up with a whole lot of forms and checklists that you'll never use, because it will just allocate whichever is the correct one out of that same 50. Regardless of whether you choose print or digital, you'll still need some physical items. So you'll need the drawing circles pads. They're a tear-off pad of 25, as well as the physical manipulatives that were on that slide that I showed you with the ball and the mats and those sorts of things. And yeah, the note down there just mentions that Q Global reports, you've got one item number to buy for Q Global reports and for checklists, and it will allocate the correct version according to the age that you indicate. Some quick information about standardization. So the data were collected between the August 2021 and February of last year. As I said, this sample was collected jointly between the UK and Australia and New Zealand, and there were no particular differences nothing significant enough to split the norms out when we looked at the data between those two regions, which is really interesting in and of itself. So our final sample ended up being just under 1,300 individuals. And there was also not found to be a need to split out the norms by sex or gender. So we have combined gender norms. We also had some clinical cases within the normative sample, and there have been some clinical validity studies looking at a group with DCD or dyspraxia. which you can read about in the manual. They're described in the manual. So kind of a summary of some of the user-friendly features that have been added to this third edition. So we've talked about the extended age range, the fact that the items are similar across the age bands, but tailored for that sort of developmental level. And the fact that having those 3 age bands does mean that whether you have a 3-year-old or a 23-year-old, you can be quite confident giving the Movement ABC-3 because you know that the item set that you're going to be presenting to that person is something that is likely to be within the realms of what they can at least attempt. And it's a really nice opportunity having those checklists as well, so that even if it is difficult to assess that individual on the test, you've got the option to look at their motor performance in everyday life by using the checklist, and particularly having that impact section on the checklist. And the checklist can really complement what you see when you administer the test in that clinical setting, because obviously they're giving you information about pretty much the rest of the person's life in that the rest of the time that you didn't get to see them in their natural environments. So the two complement each other really nicely. And being able to compare the test and the checklist and know that they're assessing similar domains, and you've got those non-motor factors that you can look at, the kind of the behaviour and the way that the person would acted during the test session versus the way that they tend to be in the rest of their life, gives you a good sense of how much maybe the non-motor factors might have affected their test results, if they were perhaps particularly nervous or not feeling like they wanted to cooperate with someone they didn't know as well, or maybe cooperating more with someone that they didn't know as well as normal. So the non-motor factors is a real asset, I think, to the Movement ABC-3. We have, other motor tests that are around, but nothing else to my knowledge that really looks so specifically at the non-motor factors that can have such a big influence on a person's motor performance. We also have the improved manipulatives in terms of the durability, the easiness to use, and also the easiness to maintain and keep clean. The demonstration videos, which are a new feature. The fact, as I said, that you can assess pretty much the whole age range, knowing that you're going to be hopefully giving the individual something that's not crazy too difficult for them. We have our new digital options, and also something that I haven't mentioned yet is that we have free training available as well for the Movement ABC-3. So you can register for that free training on the website. If you go to the Movement ABC-3 product page, there's a training tab, and you just need to register for a Brainshark account, which is free, and you'll be able to see that free training. So you don't have to purchase the test to access the training. If you wanted to look at the training as a way of finding out more about the test to help you decide whether it looks like something that is right for you, then you can also register for that free training and watch it as many times as you like. So that's probably enough from me. I'm going to just turn back to my colleagues now and find out whether we've had any questions coming in with the Q&A that we need to answer. So Caroline, I might hand to you.
Hi, Melinda. Thank you for that. Yeah, we've had quite a few questions, so I think if I begin, maybe you can help answer some of them. So let me just find them here. Okay, great. Thanks, Melinda. One question we had was, can I confirm on the test the traffic light system is just for the total test score and not for each domain?
Yeah, so the traffic light system for the test is for the total score. For the checklist, it is for each domain as well.
Okay, great, thank you. Faye, did you want to read one out?
Yeah, we've got some in the Q&A box as well. So do you want me to read those ones and you can read the chat ones?
Yep, sounds good, Faye. Thank you.
Okay, so we've got one in the Q&A box that says, can we have clarity on the balance beam? It says that feet should be touching when balancing, but then says a small gap is permissible. How important is the feet to be touching for activity, and what counts as a small gap?
I think this is where your clinical judgment should come in. I mean, the instructions are that the feet should be touching. If you feel that if there is a gap, if you feel that the gap is there because the individual is unable to stand with their feet completely touching, that's very different than just leaving a small gap because logistically it was, you know, it was difficult to get them to be touching 100%. I mean, I think when we're talking a small gap, we are talking a pretty small gap, but I think they just didn't want to make it so rigid that someone was going to be penalized for, you know, leaving like a centimetre or something like that. So there's no hard and fast guidelines as to how big the small gap should be. But I think use your clinical judgment, and also you with all of these items, you're looking at this in terms of a pattern of what you're seeing across multiple items. So if there was a gap, but the person did really well on all of the other tasks, then you'd probably be a little bit more, have a little bit more leniency about a gap than if you saw that they struggled on all the balance tasks, and then you might think, well, did they leave a gap to help them balance? So I think really use your clinical judgment there. Bear in mind that we're testing people and not robots, and so not everything is an exact science.
Thanks, Melinda. Another question that we have is, can a number of therapists access Q Global at the same time on the same account?
So, well, technically they could, but they would have to share a login, and we definitely discourage this because of data safety and privacy. So normally we would suggest that for the test, it's the same clinician that would do the test in its entirety. I'm not sure actually now. I think it used to be that more than one person could log in to the same account at the same time, but we have a new multi-factor authentication system that I think actually prevents that from happening. So I think the answer to that question really is no, it should be one person accessing the same account at a time. However, you can have multiple clinicians with sub-accounts. So you have like the sort of the parent account, and then you have sub-accounts. And so let's say you had a digital asset, like a digital manual, and you wanted to be able to share it between clinicians in the same team, for example. Each person would have their own login, and you could allocate that resource. You can move the resource around amongst accounts that are on the same parent account, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't use it for administering the test, but we could use it for sharing assets.
What we've done with a few customers, Melinda, is, as you say, we've got the team account, and then you can have add users within there, and then they log in with their own usernames and passwords to make sure that they're all compliant with GDPR and information governance.
Yep.
In a nutshell, on Q Global, if you think of the resources on Q Global as just a digital version of a real piece of equipment, so you can share it between the team on Q Global, but only one person would be able to have it allocated to their account at any one time. in the same way as obviously if you had a paper manual in a cupboard, only one person would be able to have it at any one time. Shall I move on to another question from the Q&A box?
Yeah, I'm actually looking to try and see which ones I think will probably be crossing a lot of people's minds. Some of them are quite specific, and we can certainly try and address those after the webinar. But in terms of looking at the ones that I know have come up already from other people prior to this webinar, I think I can see someone has asked, is it possible to buy parts of the kit to upgrade Movement ABC-2 to Movement ABC-3, or do you need to have to get a whole new kit? So this is a question that probably I would imagine more than one person is wanting to ask. So I think we should address these types of questions first. It is possible to buy individual parts of the kit because some of them are reused. However, we strongly discourage this for a few reasons. One being that we don't tend to keep as much stock of individual components as we do of the whole kit. And so you're likely to be waiting much longer to receive your components. Also, there's quite a lot to actually purchase by the time you have to buy new manuals, new record forms, new checklists. There's even the balance beam. It's a new balance beam, new mats. Like most of the things have been revised in some way or another. And also we can't advocate that you try and cobble together a new kit from an old kit, because we don't know what condition your older components might be in. And so for that reason, we don't provide like an upgrade kit. We would strongly recommend that you purchase a new kit. And if you do have parts that are left over from Movement ABC-2, use those as spare parts rather than try and upgrade a kit. There's a lot of downsides to doing that. Although I do understand that test kits are expensive and people are always interested to know if it's possible to do that. But in this case, we would strongly recommend against that. So I need to see someone else has also asked where the demonstration videos are kept, which is a very good question. At this point, the videos are going to be placed, there are going to be links to them placed in a document in the Q Global Resource Library. It's not available yet because the Q Global release has not happened yet. But when once that goes into the resource library, there will be, I believe it's going to be a PDF with links on it that you'll be able to click on to view the videos. And so I think that's just something to keep in touch with your assessment consultants about if you are having any difficulty locating those videos once you can view it once you get into Q Global for the Movement ABC-3. And someone else has asked, is the Movement ABC-2 still valid? So the answer is yes. Movement ABC-2 is still obviously a great test. It hasn't stopped being valid overnight. However, you just need to bear in mind that the norms for the Movement ABC-2 were gathered kind of in around 2005, 2006. And so they are getting older, and we know that we do tend to see some shifts in ability across the years. And so whilst it doesn't become automatically invalid, we just need to ask ourselves, are we using the most up-to-date norms and the most up-to-date tool that's backed by the most up-to-date research? So we certainly would never say to people that they must immediately stop using the old version and start converting to the new version straight away. There's usually a period of kind of a year or two where people are making the transition across to the new version. All I would say to you is just be mindful that while the old test is not invalid, it's not necessarily the most valid and reliable option now. and the older it gets, the more that will come into question. I know that we still have quite a number of questions in the Q&A box to answer, but I'm also looking at the time. So Carolyn and Faye, I'm not sure if there were any that you were burning to answer, or if we perhaps will try and release an FAQ document after the webinar to help answer some of the other questions that are in there.
Yeah, that's fine. We'll copy all the questions and try and do an FAQ document afterwards, and get back to people. One of the ones that I have just seen that we get quite a lot is, can the Q Global report be downloaded so then it can be saved in case notes on local files? Yes, it can. It will be able to be downloaded as a Word document or a PDF. Is that right, Melinda?
It's only available in PDF.
Just a PDF. Okay, no problem.
Yeah.
If anybody does want to forward their questions to myself or Carolyn, we can get back to you via email. So we'll both put our email addresses in the chat as well, just in case anything has been missed. I know there are quite a lot of questions we've not got round to. But like I say, me and Carolyn are happy to answer any questions over email.
So I'll just close, I think, by saying thank you so much for coming. It's great to see so many of you attending, and thank you for all your questions, and apologies that we didn't get to them all, but we will get you an answer one way or another in the next kind of days or week or so. You'll have Carolyn and Faye's contact information, so please stay in touch with them, and the recording should be available for you to view as well if you need in the next little while. But thanks again, and enjoy the rest of your day.